Hello everyone, and welcome to our one-on-one with Professor Jacob Goldenberg, co-author of Inside the Box and one of the co-founders of the SIT methodology. My name is Alon Harris, and I am an innovation facilitator and key accounts manager at SIT. And I have the pleasure today of hosting Professor Goldenberg. Hello, Jacob.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for being with us today, and we're really excited. And in the next 60 minutes, we're going to be having a conversation as if we're both in the same room sipping a cup of coffee. I might be in Chicago now, and you might be in Tel Aviv, but let's imagine that we're in a virtual room together. So SIT, for those of you who don't know, we're an international innovation agency based in Tel Aviv, Israel. And since 1996, our team of 60 innovation experts have assisted companies worldwide in more than 65 countries, by the way, to achieve their business goals through the method that is at the heart of the book that we'll be talking about today. And Professor Jacob Goldenberg, here are some really interesting facts about you. Jacob is a marketing professor at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, a visiting professor at Columbia University, the editor of the International Journal of Research and Marketing. You study creativity and new product development, innovation, market complexity, and the effect of social networks. And as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Goldenberg has many publications in leading scholarly journals around the world. The goals of our session today are as follows. We're going to discuss shortly the body of academic research that Jacob and his friends, his research buddies, that they led together, that led eventually to the establishment of the systematic inventive thinking methodology. We're going to briefly present the process of writing the new book and its unique characteristics, and we'll be touching upon some of the key questions regarding innovation, such as does creative thinking have a higher failure rate than standard thinking? What is the typical behavior of the market when introduced with innovation? And why, in general, is inside the box as opposed to outside the box thinking? Why does it lead to more creative ideas than outside the box? So at the end, we'll also devote some time to questions and answers from Professor Goldenberg, addressing some of the questions that you sent us over the past week. So thank you for everyone who sent us emails. We were very excited about this engagement and happy to answer your questions. So with no further ado, let's begin. And I think a good place to begin, Professor Goldenberg, is taking us back in time to the 90s or just before, to when you started your quest, your research, your exploration. And I'd like us to first touch upon an interesting engagement you had with the methodology that we know today as TRIZ. And if you could perhaps tell us a bit about the story of this person, Genrich Altschuler, the founder of TRIZ, and how his life, his story, and his research affected yours.
Well, this wormhole in the previous slide, actually you have to extend it to the 80s because my research was published in the 90s, but I first learned about Altschuler at the end of the 80s. Sad story about a great person, great man. He was the first that in the world that dared to ask the question whether an inventive, he was considering inventive ideas, are they a result of a random process, or maybe you can derive these creative ideas in a systematic way. Why sad? Well, Altschuler was a very interesting, very vibrant person. People were around him, and the regime in the Soviet Union back then didn't like it, and they had to throw him to jail. He made some of his breakthroughs, leading later to publishing his method Aris in jail. However, he spent a lot of time in jail, and eventually he came back broken in his body, not in his mind, because he had many students. He even became a professor in Baku University. But unfortunately, back then, even in science, there was not enough communication between the West and the Soviet Union. and therefore his work was confined to the Soviet Union. He was very famous there, but like I said, miserable life. He lost his son, and then he had an illness, Parkinson, and it was very difficult for him to function. So most of the people who knew about his work were his students. I was fortunate to be exposed to his work through one of his students that immigrated to Israel. He was also a friend of his late son, and therefore there was a little personal story there. I never met him, I never talked with him, and he passed away a few years ago, and maybe this is maybe a small way to give him some credit for this work, because like I said, everything started with Altshuler.
And what was so compelling about his work for you as a young engineer? Why did this catch your attention?
Well, I was an engineer, and he was an engineer. So he was a chemical engineer. I was an aeronautical engineer. So we came from similar backgrounds, and I had some experiences. I was exposed to his work. I took the courses. I studied something. It was not trees already. It was something that Gennady, the person who taught me, already transformed the method to something lighter and more general. But when I started to implement that on real problems, it simply worked. And there were a few defining moments where I had real problems. Some of them are in the book, mentioned in the book. And I felt that this is like magic. It really works well. I always liked creativity, so that was easy. But I never thought that you can develop something so interesting, so original, so different in a very systematic way, using what engineers are doing, just thinking.
That's fascinating. So as you described, your initial professional path began with engineering, but you obviously didn't stay just there, did you? You had quite a transition over the years and explored other content realms. What can you tell me about this path that we can see here on this slide?
Well, I was studying engineering, minding my own business. It was fluid dynamics. And I was, like I said, I was exposed to this method. I was teaching it in different organizations. But then after those defining moments, I realized that I want to do research on that. Except the professors in the engineering department, they didn't understand what am I talking about. And I was okay. I mean, they wanted me as a PhD student, but they didn't want to do that. They want me to develop something related to fluid dynamics. And but I was captivated, and I wanted to do my work and write my dissertation on this topic. Two events happened. One was that frustrated, I was looking for other fields, and I met a professor in physics who was generous enough to receive me as a student. And as they tell in physics, the joke that what is physics? Everything that three professors in physics define as physics. So it was easy to get accepted to physics. However, I still thought about engineering solving back then. But then I got a call from someone from advertising agency, Chaim Peres, who is one of the founders of SIT. And he challenged me. He told me something like, I read about your work on engineering. Yeah, it's interesting, and sure, engineers, they like creativity. However, they don't really need it. Engineers, they have to use traditional ideas, and they use creativity ideas only if the traditional ideas don't work. But we, so he said, in advertising, we need a creative idea 10 in a day. We compete, we survive only if we are creative. Let's see your work here in our field. So I found myself coming to the agency every week, studying advertising, trying to fit the method to advertising. Meanwhile, I made some progress in my PhD studies, and then I realized that this works together. And I can actually, because three professors said it's physics, then I can do my dissertation there. I can work advertising in the physics department It was hilarious. The professor in physics, they couldn't understand what is going on there. Then Chaim Peres made another insight when he told me after some progress that, you know, in advertising, it's very good that you can be creative, but the real thing is innovations, products and services. At that moment, I realized that this is going to be my dissertation. This is what I want to do in physics. But that was in physics, and that was in advertising and new product development. What happened later was that we submitted our first paper, it was on advertising, to a journal in business school. I won't tell you the name of the journal. And it's a good journal. And they rejected the paper. And the reactions were different. My professor, he said, they won't tell me what is science. I'm from physics. If they don't like it, fine, let's publish it in physics. So maybe I shouldn't tell you that, but I have 2 publications in physics because I was in physics. However, I knew that if I want my work to be read, I need to expose it to the right people, and this means the professors and the academics from business schools. I was lucky again, and I found an advisor from business school who was happy to collaborate and teach me how to become an academic in business school. And I was lucky again because in Hebrew University there was this joint, the program was interdisciplinary, asking to develop a joint project between 2 different faculties. And I was the first student in this program. They were so proud in this program, interdisciplinary one, that they wanted it to be successful. So they gave me everything I needed. They gave me scholarship. They endorsed everything. They gave me the computer, the space, everything I needed, and also the chemistry between all the 3 of us. Sorin Solomon from physics, David Mazurski from business school, was very good. So we were able to transform what I could call as a physics approach with so many formulas and all these algorithms inside into something that fits better the jargon, the language, and also tests, because we didn't test the theory in a very good way. And once I learned the social sciences tools, I realized that the combination was winning one, and then at the end of the process it was accepted in the leading journals in the field, and I was saved.
You know, listening to your story, it's remarkable the bridges you had to cross, and you say that it had a lot to do with luck, but I'm sure it had a lot to do with being passionate, adamant, maybe even stubborn to get through the different stages of your development of your research.
It was love and passion and some naiveness too. I was quite naive, and also you have to take into account the fact that when I stepped into the physics rooms, I realized that this is a terminal PhD. I'm not going to stay in the academic world. All I want to do is to found the SIT and work there, except I wanted to do some research. But when I moved to business school, then I realized that the academic gate is open, and it was very, then it was very good energies, and I had the involvement with Don Lehman from Columbia University, who endorsed that and also invited me as a postdoc in Columbia University, and from there it was smoother ride.
So let's take a few more steps down memory lane and down the path of time. And over the years, since that initial research you did, you've been publishing articles and books. And here is an article I specifically really like. It's Finding Your Innovation Sweet Spot, which was published in the Harvard Business Review. And let's talk for a few minutes about this article. I'm going to read the quote that I chose here from this paragraph, and I'd like us to discuss a few interesting themes that appear in it. So increasingly, though, we're seeing that customers lack the imagination to envision innovative products and address their emerging or even existing needs or desires. Alternatively, as a way to get beyond predictable product extensions, developers are encouraged to think outside the box. But more often than not, this kind of brainstorming yields a flurry of ideas that, while appealing, are just too far out. Let's discuss this issue of customers lack the imagination to envision innovative products. What's blocking their ability to imagine these new products and services?
The same way that you and I cannot imagine things that are not concrete. Quoting again Niels Bohr, he said that it is very difficult to forecast, especially if you want to forecast the future. So customers are not dumb, because if they are dumb, then me and you, we are also dumb. We are customers.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they can't see beyond the horizon is because it is simply a difficult task. Now, you selected a paragraph which fits very well also credit that we can give to Ronnie Horowitz, who developed the closed world, one of the smartest people on earth, and Amnon Levav, who actually coined the term sweet spot. What Ronnie found out is that if you give total freedom and you allow people to choose a path in defining objectives, they get lost. What I found in my own research is that when you want customers to report about problems that they have in the product, they are very good in that. But this is not creative, right? Because if you can, through marketing research, understand the problems you have in your product, in your service, then your competitors can do too. Mm. And it means that when a need is at what we call the demand stage, everyone knows the same, including your competitors, and nothing is creative anymore. You have to catch a need or a want when it is just emerging. And you can't do that if you let customers to think that everything is possible. Based on the work in the 90s, we learned that constraints can free your mind. Constraints can increase the creativity just because you're not allowed to choose any path you want. You are constrained to specific path where you can challenge your ideation to these specific predefined routes, and these are those sweet spots. Again, if you have scarcity of resources, then your mind is free. And this is because we are resourceful. We are very bad in predicting, but we are resourceful. So, of course, metaphorically and only cognitively, if you constrain yourself to those sweet spots, which are the closed world that Ronnie discovered, then you can discover those things that were inside or maybe under your nose, and usually you overlook them just because you're looking far away from the problem core.
So I guess this correlates very well with the name of the book, Inside the Box. So
exactly. This is why we selected it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And moving on to our present stage, you decided after all of these years of publishing to publish a book that's come out just recently by Simon & Schuster. And why now? What suddenly happened in your life to trigger the thought of writing a book, which I'm sure is a long and tedious process? What brought you to this point?
It is a long and tedious process, but again, luck is a common theme in my life. I had Drew Boyd with me, good friend, fun person to work with, and now we see Drew Boyd. And as you can see, Alon put the names, our names. Drew is the street rat, I'm the lab rat. So I was a lab rat. I wrote papers to the academic world, and as you probably know, there is a famous line that if you publish a paper, then the average number of the authors are 7, including one of the author's mother. And Drew Boyd comes from a very different world, where you have to work in the corporate, you have to innovate on demand, and you have to compete. 2 completely different worlds. When this work was published and I started to teach the courses, Dan Ariely, a good friend of mine, you probably know him from his book, Predictably Irrational, he kept nagging, you should publish your book. And I said, there is a book, there is the Cambridge Bond book, it's a good book. He said, no, this is an academic book, it's boring. You have to write a non-academic book, then people will know this work. And he kept nagging, and every time we met, every time we emailed, and eventually I cracked and I said, okay, I'll do it. But I understood that because of my background, academic background, even if I write in a non-academic way, which I try to do, then I still need a supplemental from the real world. And I'm a strong believer in the line of Kurt Lewin, there is nothing more practical than a good theory. Let me explain that my view is different. Most of scientists, they think that if you follow this line, it means that you can cook any theories you want, any models you want, and let those folks from the practice, from the industry, let them use the theories, because theories are good. My view is a little different. I think that if your theory is good, then this is the test. If they don't use this theory, then it's not good enough. If you cannot teach your theories in MBA classes, they're not good enough. This is why it was so important for me to found SIT. And I realized that in order to write this book, I have to merge those two voices into one coherent voice, and Drew, that I knew him for a few years, and he always gave classes in my courses in Columbia University. We became good friends, and I understood that together we can develop this one voice. Two rats, one voice.
And I think, you know, by taking a look at how the book was written, you can certainly hear those two voices from both points of view. But I think you've done another thing here, which is quite remarkable from my point of view as an innovation facilitator, is that you've put in the book a step-by-step guide. It's like a recipe, instructions, clear, one by one, how to use the 5 tools that are at the heart of the SIT methodology. And you've even added, in addition to this, some information about the common pitfalls in using subtraction or division or the other tools, meaning that you're adding here the best practices of using these tools and what to beware of. So I think there's a lot of empathy here towards your readers. You really want to give them something that's practical. Am I correct?
Not exactly. It's not empathy. It's maybe more, maybe less than that. I don't know. You should judge that. But I have a dream, and the dream is that all universities in the world will teach that in the classes. All industries will use that. All corporates, everyone will use that. And in order to obtain that, I cannot rely on 60 people from SIT and myself and Drew to teach that, because we become a bottleneck. So we decided to apply the open source. Right now we're doing fine, like Columbia University is teaching the course, Wharton, Chicago, so it works well. However, in order to have it diffused, disseminated all over the world, we need everyone, all the listeners of this webinar, to become teachers. I want the next book to be written by someone who is not from SIT, and this someone will share the experience. In fact, we are even developing an application where we want to, through this application, to generate a community where people can teach each other their own practice and upload all the analysis and share that. And we will host that on our website, but the point is that we want to generate a mass of people working, teaching each other, sharing all this knowledge. We have to be the first to start, and therefore we took the open source kind of path. And in fact, anyone who wants to teach it, I'll send them the slides, I'll send them the material, everything they need in order to teach a successful course.
I think that's absolutely admirable, and I couldn't agree more with your dream, and that resonates with me a lot. You know, for the people who haven't read the book, let's just mention that the book devotes a chapter to each of the 5 thinking tools. And if you could just elaborate just a bit about what is actually a thinking tool, because for many people, even the term a thinking tool is new or unusual. So what are these?
Well, it is unusual only in the context of creativity, right? Because there are methods with tools.
Right.
And the tool here is like a tool in any other method. Just pick up in a field like math or engineering or even athletics or art. There are tools. And you follow a set of prescribed steps in order to advance yourself up in the ladder and develop in our case, an idea. It could be develop a picture, develop a snapshot, develop a technique to run faster, to swim faster. You use tools in that. For some reason, historically, creativity is perceived as something without tools and not organized and without any systematic structures. Altshuler proved that wrong. These tools are tools that are relevant especially to creativity and in a very broad scope because it relates to all kinds of fields of innovation, not necessarily in business.
So to all the listeners to this webinar, we have a little surprise that Jacob and I have cooked up for you. It's very clear to us that you're interested in the book, but we'd like to tell you about what's not in the book. Here is an opportunity to hear a bit of content regarding a chapter that was eventually edited out in the process. Like in most books, you can't have everything in it. And we thought that for this webinar today, it'd be really relevant to discuss the topic of market resistance to innovation. I know personally that this is a topic that comes up a lot with my work with different organizations around the world, where they're thinking of not only how to generate a culture of innovation and instill these tools that Jacob has been presenting in their organization effectively, but they're also worried about what happens afterwards. When you implement an idea and you finally have a new strategy, a new ad, a new product, a new service, a new technology, how is the market going to accept it, or how is it going to resist it? Jacob, what can you tell us about this area, about market resistance to innovation? Is it a young area in terms of research? Is it been around for a while?
Well, resistance to change is not young. And again, I was fortunate to work with Shaul Oreg, who is an expert in resistance to change. He is coming from management research. And this is not young. However, from some reason in marketing, we just accept the fact that there is some resistance. We hope that it's not too much. And we dream about innovation, forgetting that resistance and innovation are just yin and yang. Whenever there is innovation, there is resistance. And this is part of our life, that if we innovate, we have to anticipate resistance. There are so many forms of resistance, and when you understand them, you can plan perhaps some remedies how to work with resistance, but you have to expect that. Or maybe let's put it in a different way. If you don't feel any resistance, then maybe your idea is not innovative.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting thought. You said there are different forms of resistance, so let's go through a few examples of resistance to innovation and see what forms they represent. In the next slide, there's an interesting quote regarding an invention that we will soon present. This is we're going to keep it a bit of mystery in this webinar today. And the person here reviewing this invention has said that technically we do not see why this device will ever be capable of sending recognizable speech over a distance of several miles, and that the idea is idiotic. And we are, of course, talking about the phone. So in 1876, Jacob, somebody thought that the phone is an absurd, even idiotic idea. What's going on here?
I think you should read the rest of the underlined sentences. He suggested to send a messenger to the telegraph office in the city center to send a message. Now imagine a life. Suppose that he was able to block it. So imagine a life without phone. No cell phones, of course. No internet.
Unbelievable.
No webinar.
Unbelievable. That's the worst of all. No webinar.
Thank God you cannot stop progress by one person. And there were, by the way, Bell was not the only one to invent the phone. And there are other companies, and the history tells that eventually, if there is an invention, if this is the right invention, then laws cannot stop that, even, and not even specific resistors. This is a case of, well, you see the emotion resistance here, but this is a case, like I said before about Niels Bohr's famous line, it's very difficult to foresee the future. we have this memory stick in our computer. The size of the memory stick 50 years ago was more than the size of the airplane if you want to have the same amount of memory. And you cannot foresee the future because you are stuck with concrete and very well-defined procedures in the present. And this is why you develop resistance from some form, that you just don't understand the impact of the innovation because all you can see is the next few weeks, the next few months. Usually when the innovation is not well enough, it's not defined well, and you didn't go down on the learning curve, and all the opportunities that it opens are still cluttered by the reality of the day-to-day.
Well, you know, when we were discussing this webinar, we thought we'd bring a more present example just to show that this resistance has not really changed over time. So skipping 120 years forward to 1995, here is another very emotional quotation. Commerce and business will shift from offices and malls to networks and modems, baloney. And this is, of course, a person discussing in a very emotional way what today is a reality for all of us, and we can't imagine our lives without Amazon and other e-commerce platforms. So I guess this is intrinsic in our, you know, us being human beings.
Yes, it's as I said, yin and yang. When you innovate, you have to work with the resistance. The good news is that in some cases, resistance can help you. And this is a very interesting story, but we didn't plan to talk about this in this webinar, so maybe in a different webinar, if you invite me again, I'd love to tell you how through resistance you can leverage innovation, and in fact, you can even double your net present value if you use people that we call laggards. Laggards are people with the highest resistance among the consumers, and they simply don't want to adopt. By using their resistance, you actually work against the odds, and you can double your net present value.
Well, I think you've certainly secured the next webinar with me. I'm very curious to learn about this, and I promise.
I wonder why I didn't think of this when we designed this webinar. We should.
So, Jacob, here's another example, which surprisingly enough is from the world of basketball. What can you tell us about resistance to basketball?
Do you like basketball?
I like basketball. I wouldn't say I'm, you know, I know I'm a very bad player, but I like watching it on TV.
Which team you fan of?
No, don't put me in that corner. We've got people from all around the world in this webinar. I'm going to upset someone. You focus on the research. Nice one.
Okay, so as a general basketball fan, you probably know that there are a lot of rituals in the game. And one of them is around the ball. And in the NBA, they play with a specific ball. It's different than the ball in the college. One of the reasons rookies are not doing great in the first year, they have to adjust to the ball. Now, Spalding had a great plan. They decided to innovate the ball for the NBA and make it synthetic. This will allow them in the future to align the balls NBA, college, and high school. So this was a very smart strategy. And they invested a lot in the R&D, developing a ball which is actually better than the current ball. In 2006, they launched that. And in 2006, they learned that life is a little complex because the leaders, including Shaquille O'Neal in the picture, they came against it. Shaquille O'Neal with this famous speech about asking to take the college degree of the one who made the decision, probably the commissioner. And there were players that after the game were showing the palms to the crowd, arguing that the ball left paper cuts on the palms. Oh. And this was a real resistance. And what is interesting is that it was led by the leaders, the senior players. The rookies, they kind of liked this ball, and at least they didn't say anything against it. Eventually, the commissioner, David Stern, made, according to my view, the right decision, the right call. he said that according to many statistics they collected, the ball is better. There were fewer ball-related turnovers, better scoring, but the most important statistic, as Terence says, is the view of the players, and therefore the ball was shelved. Now, let's analyze this a little bit. Who could lose the most? The senior players. They're already used to the regular ball. The rookies, however, they are used to the college ball, which is similar to the new synthetic ball. They could gain a lot. Who has the power? The senior. So this is one of the cases where expertise can play as a double-edged sword. Sometimes firms, they assume that when they innovate, the experts are their innovation agents. They should rely on them. But what happens usually in this case is when you have a radical innovation, we call it in social sciences a crossover interaction. When you have experts, then they have a lot to lose. They lose everything. They lose the edge they built after so many years with so much work. Overnight, they become exactly the same as the novices. So they will use everything they have, all the resources they have, in order to block the radical innovation. They will stand against it. This is not emotional. This is very practical. They know that they have to lose if they accept it, accept this innovation, if they adopt it. Novices, however, rookies in our case, they really like the new innovation because it helps them to close the gap. Instead of studying, learning the new methodologies, the new routines, the new techniques, they can just adopt something new together with the experts. They might beat the experts in this game only because they are more updated from the schools. And this is why they should be your allies when you want to introduce a radical innovation. In incremental innovation, everything flips over because the experts, they build their expertise by updating themselves. It's all the incremental innovations. They study everything. They build their status by being able to consult and to help with all the incremental innovations. But for novices, this is just another load, another thing they have to study. So maybe they don't have the power to resist to an incremental innovation, but they're certainly not your supporter. So to summarize that, if you have a radical innovation, your allies are the novices, people who you do not expect to help you. The experts are your gatekeepers. They will go against it. In incremental innovation, the opposite.
This discussion about forms of resistance is fascinating because it really is giving organizations or individuals who wish to innovate some sort of prediction or some sort of ability to anticipate where resistance is going to come from, what claims will be made within that resistance, and I guess that puts them in a better position to deal with it and mitigate it. And I think one of the most interesting pieces of work I read that you have done regards what you call the saddle effect. So tell us a bit about this form of resistance.
Well, this is built on Geoffrey Moore, work, Crossing the Chasm. Most of you probably heard about this book. Important to read if you deal with innovation. Moore discusses the break in the communication between the early adopters. There are about 16% of the market, according to Moore. According to our analysis, empirical analysis, it's between 13 to 19, so he was quite right. And there is just a chasm between those early adopters who like innovation. They are innovators. They are not price sensitive. They don't mind calling the help desk. In fact, they can consult the help desk. And they like the innovation only because this is new and because it provides new benefits for them. The majority, however, the rest of the population, like me and you alone, they don't really like innovation. They are ready to accept it. They will use it, but they don't love it. They don't like it. And they want the prices to go down. They want everything to work. They don't want crashes. They don't want to call the help desk. They want simple, calm, easy life. These are totally different populations. And when what we discovered together with Barak Libai and Eitan Miller, my colleagues in this research, is that this chasm appears in many cases of innovation, and guess what? It influences the sales. If you look at this, these graphs, all these three are different products, PCs, cordless phone, VCR. In all these cases, you have initial peak at the beginning of the red circle, and then you have a drop. It could be between 20 to 50%, and it can last between 2 to 7 years. And this drop is a disaster sometimes. Imagine an industry just trying to make some money in order to pay back the investments, maybe to investors, maybe dominant design the next stage, maybe even they already have shares, and everything collapses. This can shut down factories, this can shut down an industry. And guess what? If you take all the innovations, product life cycles, and you put them one on another in what we call a superposition, and you look at the result, all the product life cycles, they have this saddle inside. And in innovation, you have to anticipate this kind of saddle, this kind of drop, because again, like the resistance, this is part of your life. Product life cycle, it's a double peak. And the focus in the pictures here are the initial peak. Of course, there is a second peak, which is around 50% of the market acceptance.
So judging by your description, management teams that want to develop a strategy for innovation need to have some sort of an understanding that things will take time. On the other hand, when maybe sales drop after those initial enthusiasts bought the new products or services, and just be patient or wait to see if the market changes its direction.
Yes, you need to run, when you see the sales drop, it could be a good sign, it could be a bad sign. If this is a saddle, this is a good sign. It means that you should expect another peak and you are on track. But it could be a bad sign if this is not a saddle. It means that maybe this is the end of the product life cycle. Mm-hmm. And the way, if you don't understand resistance, if you don't understand what exactly you have to test, you just guess. You can easily test that. For example, if you sample your consumers at this stage, if most of them are, let's say 95% of them are innovators and early adopters, and it's easy to check that with a few simple questions, then it means that you are experiencing a saddle, and it means that you should expect recovery. However, if most of them are the majority, maybe 80% of them are majority, it means that this might be the end of the product life cycle. It's not a saddle. It's a simple test that you can run once you experience this drop.
Sounds like the way to go. Thank you for that. We are now moving towards our last chapter in our webinar, and this is sad because I'm really enjoying it. I don't want this to end. We sent out an email earlier on to our webinar community and invited people to send some questions. Some of these questions we've addressed via email one-on-one, and have already given some answers, and we're really happy, and thank you for everyone's engagement. And the questions we'll be presenting today are those that we felt are closest to the topic at hand and to the content of this webinar. And if anybody else has further questions regarding this content, I'll be providing you with my contact details at the end, and I will be happy to collect your questions and gather Professor Goldenberg's responses and send them back to you. So thank you, Professor Goldenberg, for agreeing to give us of your time and attention to answer everyone's questions. So question number one comes from Gail. So thank you, Gail, for this question. And she writes, as a writer-editor, sometimes I find myself stuck or lacking creative juice with my many projects. How can I apply these methods to take my creativity to new heights?
Well, Gail, I also write, and lucky for me, maybe I don't have to be creative. Most of my writing is academic, and as Dana really says, academic writing is boring. Maybe it's one of the purposes to be boring. So I don't need creative juice in writing, but sometimes I get stuck myself, and usually what happens if I'm stuck for a few hours with a paragraph and I cannot nail it down, then a miracle happens. I decide to subtract it. And guess what? The entire flow is better, but also the entire text is better. And this paragraph caused many problems. Of course, it doesn't happen every day, but when it happens, it's another empirical evidence for me that these tools, they work. Even in writing, they can work in all fields, and writing is only one of them. Maybe you, because you need the creative juice, maybe you face more problems and more challenges in the writing. I thought a little bit before that with Alon, and we thought that maybe you should apply the tools on the writing itself, even before you start. For example, you can generate attribute dependencies, like the text has to change as a function of something, maybe the number of the page, maybe some development in the story, and you can use subtractions, for example, decide that you don't use specific sentences, specific lines, specific words. Well, there is a nice exercise, don't use specific letter like maybe L, and still write a paragraph or a page. And apparently when you constrain yourself that way, you are creative and some ideas can be developed even in writing itself.
Yeah,
I know this. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that one of the elements is looking in the closed world. We were exploring that together when we read Gail's question, and who or what in the vicinity of Gail's vicinity could potentially take upon itself the role of helping Gail get unstuck. So it could be some people or colleagues, family members, next door neighbor, or it could be something, even a physical element like maybe recording, using your mobile phone to record thoughts regarding the things you want to write, and only then writing them down, or hanging pieces of paper in your, on your wall so that you can have a visual trigger of what you've written till now. So, Gail, I really recommend you read the book and try and apply these tools. I think you'll get unstuck very soon.
Actually, I have an idea. Maybe, Gail, if you are reading the book and you apply the tools on writing, tell us about your success, and I'd be happy to include that maybe in webinars, maybe in my courses, just as examples, because it's a very interesting example of applying the tools on something that is more abstract than products and services.
Excellent. So we move on. Yeah, it's task unification. Wonderful. You're applying it on the fly. Our last question, our second question is from Mark. Mark is asking if there's any way to know which technique would be the most effective for a given problem or situation. Can we systemize our approach to the SIT methodology?
Depends who you ask, Mark. You can ask me, you can ask Amnon, you can ask Drew. You will have different answers for that. Drew will tell you, I think, that he's street trapped. So if you master this method and you have the tools to master it, then as masters you just feel the right template. I'll give you the lab rat answer. There are some signals that you can detect, and they can point you to the right tool. For example, at the beginning of the innovation life cycle, most of the products and services are based on attribute dependency. So if this is something completely new, for example, applications, it's still a new world, then maybe attribute dependencies is a better tool to start with. However, slowly there are more and more attribute dependency. Even if people are not doing that intentionally, they create these dependency between variables, and you are out of variables. In the book, we show forecasting metrics, and when it becomes generated, meaning that all the variables are connected to each other, then you have no space to innovate anymore through attribute dependency. This is the time when you want to start using division, multiplication, and at a certain extent, even subtraction. There is another signal you can detect. For example, if you are experiencing the subtle then subtraction is the right tool, because in Saddle, the whole industry is in panic. They start to add. They add features, and they want to improve the product because they see the decline and they fear that this is the end of the product lifecycle. However, the reason of the decline is the product is too complex, and people don't get it, and they're afraid that maybe because of their lower skills, they cannot enjoy the benefit. So they shy away from the product. However, if you use subtractions tool, you can create a product that is more similar to iPhone. There are a lot of subtractions in iPhone, both with displacement and replacement inside them. And in this way, you can mitigate the saddle. You can maybe even make it vanish. And in the book, there is a story about Philips and the DVD, how single-handed one company just made a saddle disappear because the entire industry followed them, and they did it using SIT tool, and they use subtraction. It's a nice case that inside the book, inside the book box. And Mark, I suggest you read that, because again, if you are experiencing the saddle, subtraction could be the right tool. But maybe the street rat answer is more romantic. You can feel, if you really master this technique, you can feel it. Alon, what do you think? I
think we discuss this a lot when we do our trainings, and people ask us, we have this and this situation, this and this existing process or product or strategy or IT architecture, and how, which tool should we apply it, and what heuristics, what are the best cases to use which tool. Our first and foremost recommendation will be to use the tool that they feel most comfortable with. So this is more maybe another position, which is the level of proficiency and comfort people have with the method. And you can reach wonderful ideas from using all the tools, and you can reach the same idea even from different tools. So it's, for me, on a practical level, if you're going to apply this individually or in a team, and you want to make sure that you are attentive to the discussion, to the resistance, then you want to use a tool that you feel comfortable with, just so that you don't have that dual dialogue in your mind of how am I managing this exercise and using the tool properly, and then listening to the team and the types of ideas generated. So try and get comfortable with each of the tools one at a time, and just practice using them. Eventually, that will be probably a more important factor for me, as from my point of view, in the success of a session than if it was this tool or the other. And I agree with, of course, with you, Jacob, and with Drew, that there are other compasses that you can use. And I think every person has to find out what's good for them eventually. There's no shortcuts to anywhere worth reaching, somebody told me. So there you go. The last question, and we're very short for time, so we're going to, we apologize, John, we're going to answer this question very briefly, and we'd be happy to elaborate more via email if that's, if you feel that you didn't get a good enough answer. John is saying that he's responsible for continuous improvement in his organization, and wants to know, how does SIT's approach to problem solving differ from other common practice methodologies such as root cause analysis?
Well, again, it's about the strange connection between systematic approach, structured approach, and creative ideas. There are a lot of methods in order to solve problems, but the focus is not on creative idea. The focus is on a solution. It doesn't have to be this solution. SIT is looking for this solution, and D is just a subset of the ideas that are creative. So most of the systematic approaches, they will look for a solution without any distinction between creative and non-creative solutions. By the way, I never said that a creative solution is better, but there are reasons sometimes that we need a creative solution. SIT focuses on that. The methods that search for creative ideas, they are not structured. The way to find a creative idea according to other methods is through a non-structured way, to anarchy of thought, a lot of randomness in the process. So we have a 2x2. SIT is a systematic looking at creativity. Other approaches are not systematic, looking at creativity, or systematic, looking at every kind of ideas. Most of the methodologies that you probably are thinking of, they don't make the distinction between a creative and non-creative idea, and this is the main differences. And again, maybe the non-creative ideas in certain situations they are much better than the creative idea. But in a day that you want a creative idea, then you want to have the option to do it as we call on demand, and for that you'll need a tool because you cannot trust luck to stand on your side.
So we've gone on a very interesting journey, Jacob, but we're just about to finish. And you know, we started this webinar by discussing a story about two rats, you and Drew, and I think it's only appropriate that we finish this webinar by talking about rats, but this time about real rats. So you brought in this very unusual story, which I find extremely funny. So please tell us how this story about rats correlates with what we've been discussing today.
Well, more than 100 years ago, an earthquake shook San Francisco, destroyed all the houses. So people became homeless, and so were the rats in San Francisco, and they just flooded the street. So the mayor of the city decided to, and you see the ad, they issue a call. Anyone can catch a rat, and a reward of 5 cents will be paid for this rat. 5 cents back then was 30 minutes salary work, half an hour.
Wow, that's a lot.
Run the math in your head. 16 rats a day, and you have a salary. What the smart people are doing in this case, they start to breed rats. Now, if you think of this, breeding rats is very simple. You just catch a couple of rats, throw them into an improvised cage, throw inside some garbage, and soon enough they will multiply like rats. The problem is that rats are very smart. They are disgusting, but they're also very smart. And they escape from cages more than any other animal. And soon enough, there were more rats in San Francisco just because of this idea. I thought this story can cover a lot of themes in creativity. One is that when you start something, you cannot anticipate what will be the reaction. So there is a cause and effect, but sometimes it's circular. And when you innovate, then you don't know what your competitor or what your customer will do. And therefore, you have to be very careful when you innovate, not to fall into this trap like the mayor of San Francisco. However, there are also something interesting there. It shows that we are all creative. And the reason that we don't exercise creativity is because we are not thinking on the right thing. It's not how we think, it's what we think about. And when we are constrained, then all the fixedness, they just fall, and all the clutters based on other ideas and opportunities, they are not there anymore. And therefore, our mind is free and we have better vision just when we apply scarcity of resources. And maybe this could be a good reminder for us if, for example, we need to innovate, we have some assignment but we just want to innovate, then just in the opposite direction, polar opposite to the common approach to add things and to think, looking at the horizons and try to dream, let's just look inside, focus on what's inside us with this scarcity of resources and constrain ourselves. Inside our own little world, there are more creative ideas, and there is another advantage with them. Because they are close, because they are inside, most of them are easier to implement because we know everything.
Thanks, Jacob. I totally agree, and I think these days we hear more and more with organizations that we work for that they must find the feasible ideas, and it's important to find the balance between innovative and practical, and the more we push them to use existing resources within the closed world, within what they already have, whether it be machinery or intellectual property, whether it be manpower or skills that they own, all these enable them to eventually roll out these ideas much, much easier because it's starting from something that they already master. For just before we say goodbye, what do you think, Jacob, will a person who reads the book gain? Just your two cents about this.
I hope, first of all, that the person who reads the book enjoys it, because without fun, creativity is something, it's like a soul without body. You need a body, you need a soul, both of them. So I hope it will be fun to read. We made our efforts. I hope we did a good job on that. While having fun in reading that, I think the most important thing is that if you want to innovate, and if you agree with these tools like Inside the Box and the specific tools like Attribute Pensy and Subtractions, I hope that the book will convince the reader to make the first step. We are ready to help. We have this page, the book page, InsideTheBoxInnovation.com. We have SIT that can support. I would like people to start the first steps and then share with us their experience, because after the first steps, they can decide if they want to start this journey. If they start the journey, the book is not open source. It's nice, but you need to train yourself more. You need to experience more. You want to read more, and you want to be in touch with people who already masters this way. But this is a fascinating journey, and when you decide to start this journey, then I think the energies will come from inside, and therefore you don't need books and you don't need recommendations. You just need to consult with the experts and train yourself to become an expert.
And continuing your theme, Jacob, of dialogue, this is my email here, guys. Please, if you have any comments or questions regarding today's webinar, the book, we would love to hear your thoughts. We would love to collect your comments, and we would love to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate and reach out to us. Jacob, it's been a pleasure.
It was my pleasure and privilege.
I've learned so much throughout this webinar. Our audience would agree. Thank you for taking the time and the effort to being with us. And yes, I will be doing another webinar with you for sure, because you've opened our minds to so many interesting topics, and we'll be certain to get back to our community and provide them with the dates and times of our next engagement. Thank you and have a great day.